Welcome back to the Comics Cube, everyone. We are recapping Echolands #2 with J.H. Williams III. How are you?
Good. Hello.
First question is this cover.
Uh-huh.
What's the thought process behind coming up with a cover that works this way and also works this way? Because this cover, I can see what you did. You just went diagonally.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, that the first one there kind of looks like one way it looks like she's, dodging or trying to escape some sort of action. When you turn it the other way, it looks like she's dropping down. So it kind of works in that regard. The other one, it was a bit of a challenge. I think the thing I'm not as happy with is the placement of her eyes when you turn it the other way. The fact that I think they're a little too sideways for me.
You would have rather it be like this?
A little bit. Yeah. Because it will have still worked in the other direction. But, by that point, I was already into painting it. I didn't want to change it digitally or anything like that. So, but the covers, trying to get them to work both directions, at least somewhat, is not been easy. And so I think they're somewhat successful, but not as successful as I would like. So with Arc 2, whenever we manage to get that on the shelves, I might just ditch that idea, because by that point, everyone knows the score with the series, right? So
everyone knows it's sideways.
Yeah. So I might not even deal with it, or I might come up with cover designs that are slightly more abstract, so where it doesn't require a sense of placement. So it might be like a series of visuals in one image that might work in either direction. I don't know. I haven't thought about that yet very much, because I'm still working on the first issue of the next arc. I tend to do the covers last.
Okay.
So I have time to think about them.
Will you retain the arching logo?
Maybe not. That's another thing I haven't decided, because one thing I do like is there's been a couple instances in ads that we've designed where the logo is just horizontal and larger. And it has kind of a cool, more dramatic effect in that way. So I might, I don't know. I'll have to, I'm still wrestling with that decision. But there is something kind of cool about the arch. It's different. It looks different, but it can be difficult, especially in composition, because we have sort of like those gate-like design, but then it's also kind of like a target, some sort of digital target at the same time.
That's true.
It's a lot to contend with compositionally. So as you'll see with the next covers, I start fucking with it, where it's not always the same. So like the cover to #3, I think there might even be an ad for #3 in the back of that, and you can see I've just completely tilted the whole thing.
It's this.
Yeah,
this one.
Yeah.
Now you're just in the middle. It's not even in the corner anymore.
Yeah.
I do love how you're using it to kind of zoom in on Hope.
Yeah.
I've seen the Amazon page for the first collection.
Oh, I haven't even looked at that yet.
And I don't know if that's going to be the cover of the trade. It's basically a group shot of everyone in Echolands. And it's definitely not a cover that works both ways.
No.
Is that
for the collections?
Is that the cover?
The collections, we're not going to play that game. So yeah, that's I'm not sure what they're showing on there, because I haven't even looked at it, because it's really kind of just like a placeholder solicit, really.
Yeah.
Because we haven't even finalized the page counts and stuff. So, what's actually going to be in the entirety of the book. I haven't even gotten a dummy copy, because they want to print up a kind of a dummy copy for me to see how it opens and what it feels like to hold. But right now, I think roughly we're nearly, what was it? Nearly 300 pages, I think, for it, which is a sizable book.
Yeah, it'll be worth it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's going to be, one thing I can say, it will be bigger than normal. So,
So it'll be
yeah,
bigger than this. Okay,
yeah.
because I was gonna say I love this. It's a little small for me. I would like it bigger. And so I like hearing that. When
But
I
yeah,
say it's a little small for me, it's because like I'm used to your work in absolute editions.
uh,
Yeah, I have all three Prometheus and your Sandman Overture in absolute. So like
nice.
I'm used to seeing your work big, is what I'm saying.
Uh, uh,
So issue 2 picks up where issue 1 left off, and Hope has just blown up everyone except for the Golem, who's still unnamed and whose tricks who doesn't get blown up because she's a Golem. And Hope basically passes out, and Core goes to fight the Golem. I find it fascinating. You did tell me that you'd have page numbers as part of the design.
yeah.
That is really cool. Just putting in her half face within the number 2. You must have known what kind of effect that gives in a medium that is given us Two-Face and Jonah
Oh, right.
Hex.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Right.
what's the
Yeah.
inspiration behind just putting in half her face in this introductory page?
Well, in some ways, I kind of wanted it to be a little bit of a mirror of the image that's on the left side. So on the left side, we get Hope's full face,
Mm-hmm.
but that one panel where even part of her face is being cropped off, she's also crying.
Yes.
And then on the other side of the spread, we have embedded in the number 2, the other half of the villain's face with the black streak from her plucking that orb out of her face. So
Yeah.
so I like that mirroring aspect, and it's something that we did with the 2 different covers for issue 1, does that, where they're sort of duplicating posture and movement between her and the Golem. So I just kind of like the idea, because they both, their silhouettes when they're both fully clothed are the same. Just one
Yes.
is in red, one is in black. But they both, when you think about it, both wear red and black in just different variation. So I like the visual connection of that. And so it's something I'm playing with here and there. But I'm not trying to overdo it. I don't want it to like be one of those things that just hits you over the head with it, but it does sort of allude to the relationship to come in a way between the 2 of them.
That's interesting. This is the 3rd time we're talking about Echolands, and one thing that has come out is that this villain is really an echo of Hope. I find that fascinating because usually the echo of the hero is the main villain, and that's not really the case in this book, is it?
Correct. Yeah.
So I guess my question about that would be, will somebody appear to end up being kind of a counterpart to Taros Demond, or
I think that's Hope.
And it's still Hope. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, pretty much. I mean, because ultimately, no matter where we go with the other characters and how profound their roles will be in everything that's to come, is still centered around Hope. It's Hope's story. And that becomes, it ebbs and flows on that focus, which it should, because you're dealing with a multiple personality cast. And so you want to be able to focus on the other characters and give them their due and time, so you can either choose if you like them or not like them for whatever reasons. But ultimately, as we go along and as the story becomes bigger and bigger, Hope's role becomes more and more dominant as we go, for obvious reasons. So yeah,
It's her story.
yeah. She's
And
the only one who can blow people up.
and there's only one person who has known that from the beginning, and it's her friend slash lover Core, who I love now that you've mentioned that this whole thing is reflecting each other.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then Core's just tilting the balance there with his weight, and I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's so large and such an imposing presence. And then I love the next page because you have them fighting within sound effects. I keep
Uh-huh.
telling you, you got away with these things that were I feel like they shouldn't work, and yet they do.
Yeah, the sound effect thing, I have no idea what spurred that decision when I was thinking about the layout, other than wanting it to be fun with the sound effects, to have the sound effects when we use them to feel a little bit more visually interactive. And so, so I try to come up with different ways to play with them. In some instances, the sound effects are used very traditionally. In other places, they're not. Because I think what kind of made me want to do that is a lot of old comics, the sound effects were drawn on the page, right? And so
Yeah.
a lot of times you would see instances where they would be compositionally incorporated and feel more joined to the art rather than just something laid on top. So that's something I kind of got really involved in all the way back in Promethea, where we would do that. And I kind of like, no, the sound effects are kind of part of the visual narrative for me. And so I want to be able to play with them and have them interact with the compositions more directly. And so I'm always looking for ways to kind of to exploit that idea.
Always looking for something new. That's
Yeah.
even after all this time, I think that's pretty amazing. So our heroes do manage to escape, and we get our first look at Terrace Demond. Is this his real face?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Because I gotta say, I was expecting, and you told me not to expect it, but I was expecting maybe somebody who looked disfigured
Uh,
or a dude with like, white hair, like Saruman or something.
yeah,
But
right. Because he's a wizard, right?
yeah,
He's
because he's a
referred to
wizard.
as the wizard. So I kind of I'm super happy that the fact that we chose not to show him thoroughly in the first issue. You just see that sort of amorphic hologram type thing,
Hmm.
because we're referring to him as the wizard right away, which paints this expectation. People think of a wizard, and like you said, they think of Saruman or Gandalf or whatever. And so there's like this stereotype expectation. And then when we do show him, you're like, wait a second. you know, he doesn't look like a wizard.
He looks like a 1950s suburban dad. Was that
But
intentional
clearly a
though?
little bit psycho in the face.
Yes. Somebody who keeps people in the basement.
Yeah, yeah.
Was that intentional though, to make him look as normal, relatively speaking,
Yes.
as possible?
Yeah, I wanted everything about him, other than the way he's dressed, to defy your expectations of a typical villain. Um, so I just kind of felt like it was again trying to look for something new to use for a villain character. And what I find interesting is the few scenes he has in this issue. Even though he has that appearance that defies the expectation of a villain, never once do you question his villainy.
No.
He still is. You look at him, you're like, yeah, that dude's bad news. So I kind of like that we managed to find that that balance there. It's cool.
A lot of it is the way that his face is drawn. A lot of it is the angles,
Yes.
the low angle that you use. He has, I I want to say he has a mean expression on his face, but really he has no expression on his face.
Correct. Right. Yeah.
And I think that's fascinating that no expression reads as a bad expression.
Yeah, he's got bad expression resting face. But
Birth.
what'll be fascinating for me is to see how people react over time to him as we show more and more of his interactions within the plot. And also imagining that face when he's speaking to the interviewer at the end of each issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who is not you and Haden.
Right.
I love this spread because the building here is within his arrow. But I also love the spread of San Francisco because do I see an Astro Boy museum?
Kind of. An Astro Boy or Astro Boy inspired building. Yeah.
Which therefore will we see manga inspired characters coming up in future issues of Echolands?
Maybe there is at the end of that issue in the melee between them and the pirate group.
Yeah,
you'll note in a couple shots there is a manga character.
that is true.
Even in black and white.
And that is true. It's in the background.
So that the fact that we did that tells me no, there must be a manga land somewhere in Echolands.
Perfect. I also see a McDonald's in this world.
They get everywhere. You can't escape them.
In this world, is there a McDonald's land where Ronald McDonald is real and the Hamburglar?
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe anything is possible here.
Anything is possible in Echolands. I love this next spread where they're walking down this network of tunnels, and you actually do make it look like a network of tunnels, right down to a little spot in the middle where it's showing all of the arrows and all of the different paths.
Yeah, it was very time consuming to figure out.
I was gonna ask how time consuming that was to figure out.
Yeah, it was super challenging, particularly because it's it gave us that scene gives us an opportunity to have more exposition as the characters are interacting with each other, trying to figure out what to do with each other and what to do with themselves. So not only did we need that exposition, but I needed to sell the idea of these winding tunnels. So the layout, I had a lot to challenge myself in what would fit and not look overly crowded and still get all the effects that we want. I also wanted to kind of convey a loose sense of time passing. When you read the dialogue, you don't get that sense of how much time might be passing that they're down there, really, which is one of the things I wish maybe we could found some way to enhance that in the dialogue. But one of the things I was thinking when I was doing the layouts, instead of having everything be just like an overhead shot to give you that sense of windingness, it needed to have moments where we could focus in on the characters. So it made me think, well, yeah, this is a tunnel layout, but there's no reason we can't change angles inside that of the characters so we can get that character focus. And then that made me think of montages a little bit. So there's instances where those close-ups kind of fade out. And that made me think of time passage too, like things moving differently. So taking all that into consideration, along with the heavier exposition bits, yeah, it was super challenging, very difficult to figure out those layouts and make sure that they were working the way I wanted them to. And it's so funny because like the scene after that where the villain's crawling out of the debris,
yeah,
that page is very chaotic and a lot going on it, but it was 10 times faster to draw.
I can see that. It is one giant image.
Yeah.
So but you've done the whole overhead thing before a few times.
Yeah.
But this is the first time I've seen you within the overhead zoom in on these particular characters. So
Yeah.
I think that's pretty
Yeah.
innovative.
Oh, cool. I'm glad you like it. I think it's effective because it gets the reader connected to them. You know, you get to see their expressions more. And it also was more effective to do that because it is a group that we're
Mhm.
dealing with rather than just a couple characters at a time. So that, yeah, I like the end result of the way it moves. It's interesting. I
I f-
almost wish we could have spent more time down there, but we just didn't have the space to, because certain events had to happen in this issue. But I would have loved an issue where we spent maybe twice as long down there, or even three times as long down there, and showing more of those winding layouts. Um, but yeah, if we did that, there would be room for the other stuff. So
in a case like this too, since this is the second issue and we're still getting to know these characters, I feel like
yeah,
those close-ups are important because in
yeah,
the previous times that you've done it, you were already using established characters, or like in Promethea, it was like the 27th or something issue where you did that overhead shot of her house.
yeah,
And those at that point, those people are already well established. But this one is nice because it really does give us time to get to know these new characters.
yeah. The overhead thing I think was important to only use it in a couple spots just to reinforce and sell the idea that they're in these tunnels and that they're following this path. So it became more of a kind of a rudimentary, you know, mechanical exercise at that point to have the couple shots overhead. So the reader would fully understand what the heck is going on.
In a case of laying out a spread like this, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is really 8 panels all in one spread,
Yeah.
do you start from the upper left, or do you have a basic idea of where you want to go, or did you start from the middle here with the arrows, the space with all the arrows?
I start from the left, and work my way across. Uh, Particularly when you're going to do a scene like that, it's good to do that because you want to make sure that the flow is doing what you need it to do, compared to what the script is saying needs to happen. So if they're winding through tunnels, it is better to like plan it as you go to get that across. I think the the one thing that I wasn't sure about going in until I did them was figuring out, because we're dealing with overhead shots, we wanted the tunnels to have little clues about the world in a way, clues that there's something involved there, but we don't tell you what it is. But when you examine the walls of the place, there's like machines inside the walls that the characters clearly don't even see. And there's all these weird machines. And that was the sort of thing I wasn't sure where I was going to put them as I went along. So I kind of figured that out as I went, what would work and not work.
There's also a skeleton in there.
Yeah, poor bastard, right?
You gotta
Got
wonder how he
trapped in
got
the
in there.
wall.
The machines, by the way, look very inspired by the King of Comics. Is that
Yeah,
is that
yeah,
okay? So they're
yeah,
They're Kirby machines. Is there a
yeah.
Kirby land?
Why not?
I'm I'm glad that the next 2 pages you gave yourself some time to breathe. It,
Oh.
and it's perfect because it still gets the message across that this villain is really dangerous, no matter how much, a
Yeah,
building just came down on her and she's like, I'm fine.
yeah. Yeah. Well, clearly, the explosion. I mean, my favorite bit is the burnt body. It's
Yeah,
juxtaposed upside down in that first shot. And her little eyeball orb thing, her eye drone is like, where is she? Where is she? Is something, I just love that. Even though it's like one shot, it does feel like I can almost see that in a film to where, you're following the orb moving around different objects of the debris until it comes across and then goes. The only time we break that is when it goes down into the tunnel. So
And I feel like that's it looks like a fairly easy page to draw compared to the previous spread. But I feel like, a novice artist would have a hard time tracking the path of this little eye drone.
yeah,
If they
it's
were to
it's
do it
deceiving,
themselves. Yeah.
right? Yeah, I can see what you mean. It's deceivingly simple when you look at it because it is one shot, but getting the choreography right and making sure that the drone isn't just overlaid on top of everything, that when you follow the path you can tell it's going around things. um, so it has this interesting layered effect. Particularly Dave did a great job on the color, but when I had it in black and white, there's like a really cool, you get this real sense of layering going on with the objects, particularly because that you got that jagged piece that's jutting across,
Yeah.
you know, and the panel borders kind of go in and out of those objects. Is fun. That part was challenging to make sure that was working. Yeah.
The 3D-ishness of that whole
Yeah.
jagged piece getting
Yeah.
through.
And
We're-
Dave did such a great job with the color to not lose those aspects, but yet have it feel dark and encroaching, a
Yeah.
little bit claustrophobic.
And the brightest thing here is the fire and the villain.
Yeah.
Very interesting. We're back in the tunnels in the next one. And now they're slanted.
Yeah. Well, I kind of wanted, since we were going to do another layout that was the same idea, is like, how do I can't just repeat the same idea. It has to feel like it's doing something different, because otherwise it's just repetitive. And I imagine, okay, there's all these tunnels under San Francisco. Why would they all be going in the same direction?
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be kind of cool to and it allowed me to make your eye move in a particular way. So like those first set of panels, you have this kind of jagged effect before going up,
Yeah.
and then the dialogue placement completely reinforces that, which is cool.
And again, there's that big machine in the middle.
Mm-hmm. That was my favorite one to do.
Really, really looks like a Kirby machine, people.
Yeah.
These different machines, I assume they will pay off at some point.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
Whenever we get to the reveal of the reason why Echolands exists, all that stuff plays a part. Yeah.
That's awesome. And now at this point, we have our group of heroes arguing with each other, being dysfunctional. How important was it to make sure that this was a dysfunctional group? I think it surprised me that a lot of them actually don't like Hope.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah. Because
Yeah,
I would have just assumed that since she's the main character, she was the leader of this group.
yeah. At this point, she sort of was she's become leader by default in a way.
Mhm.
Mainly only because she's got Core on her side, really. Because without Core to back her up, the others probably would really, really turn on her. But I kind of feel like there's one thing, starting a story as far into it as you can sometimes has a little bit of a drawback. And one of the drawbacks is we don't get to see her interact with these people before all hell breaks loose. We just get that little tidbit in issue 1. And even in that scene, Cora was like, what the hell are you doing? So we don't get a good sense of what the relationships are like. For all we know, they did get along a little bit better until she did what she did. And has brought hell with her upon doing it. So what her actions have changed whatever the dynamic was, and if there was any tensions, that's only enhanced now.
Yeah. And I think it's also really clever what you do next, which is you introduce the Green Horizon 3018 vermin elimination unit, which is just this big spherical robot with tentacles. Uh, and what it does immediately is it identifies every single race that these characters are in. So it's in really quickly with the introduction of this one character, we're getting the scope of Echolands.
Yes. Yeah. That was a lot of fun to do and a bit of a challenge, but I think, Hayden and I talking that over, I can't remember exactly how we came to we knew that the robot would identify them, but I don't remember how we decided on the simplicity of that information. That's the sort of thing that naturally happens in the scripting writing process, where he and I are going back and forth. And one of the things because Echolands is so visually complex, we're always looking for ways to try to be as efficient as possible with the information we need to get across. And for some people that might feel like it's not enough exposition, but in some ways I kind of feel like I can relate to that, but at the same time I kind of feel like, well, everything you need to know that we want you to know right now is there.
Yeah.
So we're basically demanding you extrapolate and think about what we're showing you, because all the information is there. So that scene, I think, should raise a lot of questions for people about like what the hell is going on. And even the robot, when you examine what the robot is analyzing, it's not even quite sure itself, which
No,
I
it's
like
not.
too. Yeah.
All of the robots' conclusions about their specific homelands are in question marks.
Right. So it raises some interesting questions from a story narrative perspective, in the fact that here's this robot making assessments, identifying these people based on their attributes, their physical attributes. So it has access to data of some kind that would lead it to those conclusions, but why isn't it not sure? Right. So that's stuff to think about, Yeah.
And
And
therefore we're not sure.
What's that?
And therefore we're not sure.
Exactly. And what I like about that whole thing is, like, it's giving you information, but there's no hand holding involved. We're not spelling it all out. We want there to be mystery, and for the reader to be asking questions and to think about what they're seeing. Yeah, it's fun.
You know what I like about that? That's real life. That's what happens when you meet people.
Exactly.
Like, you get bits and pieces of information about each of them, but you're not going to know everything about them immediately.
Yeah.
So you learn about them in the course of getting to know them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love, like a couple of the details that we offer there about where some of these people are from, are things that the reader has no idea what the robot's referencing yet. Like Horror Hill or Metamaru Mountain.
I was going to ask about Metamaru Mountain. Okay, so let's go through it one by one. Is that okay?
Sure.
So you've got Hope, Red Hood, a human female from the robot says Mythwood. So I am assuming, because of her red hood, that is a place where myths live. I guess kind of like fables.
Maybe.
Okay.
I mean, at least it's a place that people from there, or people who've been there, feel like there's a lot of story about it, about this place. Whether those stories are true or not true, I mean, who knows at this point. But there's definitely inspirations going on from that, and the idea of calling it Mythwood kind of speaks to that.
And what about Core, human male from Genghis?
Yeah.
Asian inspired.
Yeah, he's definitely, I think when we mentioned this last time, he's sort of like this biker Hun dude. And he comes from, I mean, you can infer a lot from the fact that it's named Genghis, of what that land or realm he's from might be like. And he's one of the few characters as we go along we don't give away a lot about him. He's very close to the chest on speaking about his past.
Yeah, that's
So
actually a whole point in the first
yeah,
page of
yeah,
this whole issue.
yeah.
What about my personal favorite, Castrum from Old Chicago?
Castrum from Old Chicago. We wanted, I mean, I don't know how he came up with this guy, other than like when we were coming up with the cast, we're like trying to think of diverse characters from different types of genre that we could do. And one of the things we, came up with was, gangsters. I don't know if maybe some of that was inspired because by Haden works on a game called Mafia,
Okay.
video game. So maybe some of the inspiration came from that. I can't remember because some of these characters we came up with them quite a while ago. But when I didn't want to just have it be a straight gangster character. I wanted it to be like, well, okay, what can we do with him that is he's clearly a gangster, but what can we do with him that makes it not typical? And the first thing that came to my mind was like old Dick Tracy comics.
Dick Tracy.
so that made me think, oh man, all of old Chicago, that's what all of old Chicago is like. Everyone is like him. They're all like these,
Two-dimensional,
weird looking guys and living these gangster lives and dealing with the cops, and everyone there has these peculiar facial features, So.
There's always that one thing that makes you know that it's them. So you mentioned off the record earlier that the style was hard to emulate, to draw.
Yeah.
How much of that is because most Dick Tracy is drawn sideways, profile, and you're drawing
I
him?
hadn't thought about that. I'm not sure. I think part of it is I always feel like, as weird looking as he is, in some ways I kind of feel like, I guess what I wrestle with him is wanting him to be odd looking, but still work within the world of Echolands. So you can see him from various angles, like you're saying, versus a typical comic strip. That's the same. And then make him, even though he's so cartoony, that you can't help but believe in him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, I'm always wrestling with, am I doing it properly? Am I handling his weirdness and his realness balanced well? And I always feel like I'm not as weird as I should be with him, because when I was drawing him, I didn't go back and look at Dick Tracy comics. I didn't do that on purpose. I wanted it to be like what's inspired in my head, what I feel like that looks like.
Yeah.
So after I had drawn him, I had bought a Dick Tracy collection that was a little oversized, and I was looking at that. I'm like, oh, I'm not drawing him weird enough. The Dick Tracy characters are so much more weird. So if we ever get to show old Chicago, that's something I want to be very mindful of, is how weird I can get with the characters. So
everybody write in and say how much you want to see old Chicago and Echolands, because I want to see that.
I'm sure we'll get to it at some point, just when.
What about Dina from Mythwood or Metamaru Mountain? Now, I have a faint idea of where everything is, of
Okay.
what like I can kind of see what everything can be. I have no idea what Metamaru Mountain would be.
Well, you'll find out. I'm not going to tell you. You'll be pleasantly surprised when we show that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be fun. And as far as Dina being from Mythwood, there's a kind of a clue to indicate that that's not where Dina is from. Stylistically, quite different than Hope.
Yeah,
So,
she's looks very different, and obviously is a non-binary elf, and not a human.
Yeah.
And you have Caniff, who is from the Nassau Islands. I feel like that name is on purpose.
Yeah, I wanted one of the greatest adventure uh, comics creators of all time is Milton Caniff.
Yeah.
And so I thought it'd be kind of cool to name this adventure looking character after him. Stylistically, he doesn't necessarily look like Caniff art. There's a little bit of it in there, but it's more of kind of an inspiration, really. So, like old adventure heroes and stuff like that.
Definitely dressed like somebody is about to go off into adventure into the seven seas or something.
Yeah, like a swashbuckler type. Yeah.
And finally, you have Rabbit, who this particular robot can find no data about.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Probably because his mutations.
Can't figure. Oh wait, and I missed Rosa from Horror Hill.
Oh yeah.
And she's obviously a vampire.
Yeah.
I like that you have one specific character here that Dave Stewart doesn't have to do anything on.
He does a little bit. So like that was another character that have found challenging as I go along, because I always envisioned her as well as anyone else from Horror Hill being black and white, as if they stepped out of a 1970s horror comic or horror film from way back, like old Universal monsters or whatever. So as I was drawing her, there were certain things I was doing stylistically that I thought were adequate. And then at a certain point, I'm like, no, it's not working right. So one of the things that became super clear, like, okay, so when I draw her, trying to figure out what that style should look like, it's been a challenge because she needs to look like she's fit. It still fits in with everyone, even though she's in black and white. And so I started off using more solid black inks on her, like everyone else, and then going in with wash tones.
Mm-hmm.
But I started finding that it was still very almost too stark. So the whites of her were too white.
Yeah.
And then the shadows were too dark. So, because like when you look at a black and white movie, say you're watching a black and white movie on your TV, and if it happens to be a film that is widescreen, you'll have the black bars at the top, right? Those black bars are always way darker than any of the blacks on the film.
Of course.
And I thought, yeah, so I thought that was kind of interesting to think about. So when I got back the colors from Dave on her, the first thing I noticed is she was just way stark compared to everyone else. It's just she looked like she was spliced in rather than part of the setting.
Okay.
And so yeah, so even though I was using tones on it, it still wasn't done in the best way possible. So I had Dave actually add just like 10, maybe 10% gray over the top of her. And then even with that, I still wasn't satisfied. So on the color files, I went in and added more tone myself over the top to see if I could get it to look more like what I saw in my head. And seeing it in print, it's pretty close to what I was wanting. But as I work through the issues and draw her more and more, I'm very much aware of the things that bug me with that style and constantly trying to refine it. So it's gotten to a point where the shadows on her are more, there's black shadows, but they're less hard, I guess you could say. And the whites are not white. They're like, I'm making sure I'm adding a certain level of gray on anything on her, unless if I want a really, really strong highlight to try to make that style more the way I see it. And it's super important to do because when we get to see Horror Hill, all of Horror Hill is like that. So making sure that style is working the way it needs to for that to function was super important and it's been a big challenge.
So what is she going to look like in the raw cut?
Pretty much the same, other than any of the additional tones that Dave and I did after the colors were done won't be there, but you'll see some wash textures,
Okay.
just not as profound as they should be.
I love, so when they get out of the tunnels, they see, they get to the seaport, they see the Scurvy Queen, the ship, and I love that the Piers number is number 32. Feel like that was intentional.
Yeah. Yep.
Feel like that's a number that has some significance to you. But
Yeah.
do you, yeah.
It's an important number, symbolically about, important paths, and these characters have definitely now have no choice but to be on a life-changing path that will change their world. So,
And we meet Bloody Gums, who,
yeah,
if you want to talk about somebody who looks like he stands out from the rest of this,
yeah.
from the rest of everyone, did you paint him directly?
He's all done in washes, and then Dave colorized those washes into paint. So basically, Dave colored him the way I would if I was coloring him.
Mm-hmm.
But the goal was to make him feel like he stepped out of an old cover of a pirate novel.
That's what I was gonna say.
Storybook of some kind, yeah.
Who's the inspiration behind him?
No one in particular, just something that kind of evokes that idea of old world painted illustrations of pirates.
Yeah.
Which was the amount of time I spent on that dude was insane. So like all the rendering that you see in his color is all there in black and white, every bit of it. And so, yeah, he was taking way too long. So I'm kind of happy he meets a certain end because I didn't have to draw him again. But it was, the whole scene was super challenging, not just because of him, but making sure his crew were all different styles as well, that are not the same styles as our main cast. And so that was, yeah, a trick.
Let me ask, if when J.H. Williams, the writer, is working, how much of it is him thinking, I'm gonna put in some real work for J.H. Williams, the artist? And when J.H. Williams, the artist, is working, how much of it is him cursing out J.H. Williams, the writer?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm writing this stuff, I'm not thinking about how much work it's going to be. I'm just thinking about how cool it will be to try to do it. What if it works out well, the end result works out well, then that'd be super fun for the story, right? So I'm thinking about everything I write down is about what enhances the story. But when it comes down to the drawing stage, there's things that decisions that were made for the writing of the story that I'm like, why the fuck did I do that? So Rosa is a great example. So when the sequence I'm drawing now is, because we get to see her homeland and it's all like her, the amount of time it's taking, I'm like, why the hell did I do it? It was a dumb decision. The result will look cool, but man, I'm spending a week per page.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So but that's what's fascinating about that part, because it's so time consuming as we're writing different sequences. So we first get to see her homeland towards the end of arc 1. And that was a lot of time. It took a lot of time. And so when it came time to write the next issue, I was telling Haden, I'm like, we have to find some way to break up this content, find different scenes to put in here and stretch out the content in different ways by having new scenes that weren't necessarily planned to be in that particular issue, because the art style is so time consuming. I'm like, if I'm doing a whole issue in that style, it's just going to kill me. And so we found ways in the writing to kind of give myself breathing points, which in retrospect is beneficial, because now those issues have more diversity in what we're showing, because we have a little bit of where she's from, then we switch to another scene that involves someplace entirely different. And so you have, I think the issues will be stronger for it in selling what the idea of what Echolands is, instead of having just like 2.5 issues all in one place, if that makes sense.
I've spoken to some artists recently, and then I think they a common theme has been they do something really big, then they do something really small, and then doing something really small is basically the writer telling them, I'm gonna give you a break because you just drew something really big.
Yeah.
I love how that keeps on coming up, because I feel like we fans, we don't think about that stuff. We're just like, oh yeah, you guys are drawing machines.
Right. Right. And
You
then,
can,
yeah.
you can draw anything.
Right. And we're in the writing process of the issue that falls after the one I'm currently working on, that I'm drawing. And there's going to be a scene in there that it's going to be really cool for the story, but I am dreading having to execute it. It's going to be crazy time consuming. But once we do it, it'll give the reader a sense of scope of just how big some events could feel and take place. Yeah.
Very cool.
So setting up things to what to expect as we keep moving forward, I guess you could say.
When you say you're spending a week per page on issue 7, I think that surprised me, because the last time we spoke, you were working on issue 7.
Yeah.
So does that mean that after issue 6, there'll be a bit of a break until the next issue, or?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't really announced that, but I don't see how I don't see how we couldn't have that. So, it's probably the way the series will probably function. It'll be probably more like a seasonal thing.
Yeah.
Which is,
it's fine.
Hopefully that's fine. People are going to enjoy it. By the time they get to the end of this first arc, that they are in for a penny, in for a pound at that point, and be fine with whatever the pause is, I guess. Much like watching a television show.
Yeah.
These breaks in between, so.
I think a lot of non-Marvel, non-DC stuff, that's basically how it's been structured. I think especially Image, Monstrous by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda.
It's fantastic, yeah.
Which is great. It's working off of that seasonal type of structure. IDW, Walt Simonson's Ragnarok is doing the same thing.
Yes, yeah, because I always worry about those pauses, particularly for me, because like this is my first big foray into just being completely independent. So thinking about any breaks in publication makes me very nervous that it could kill the series, right? But at the same time, there's nothing I can really do to make anything different. And then I started thinking about like Walt Simonson with Ragnarok. I mean, he works seasonally with that story, but even in one arc, there's gaps between issues, because and I started thinking about that. Well, that's obviously working. He can do it, but then I started telling myself, but that's Walt Simonson. Of course, it's fine for him.
Hasn't he just gotten better?
I know. It's like incredible.
How does that happen?
I don't know, because he's Walt Simonson.
I'm reading Ragnarok and I'm like, how did you get better like 30 years later? Like everybody's still talking about your Thor, and this is actually better.
Yeah, you're right. But one of the things I think about, like, okay, so Sandman Overture was my first real experience. Promethea was kind of odd. Promethea had an odd schedule really quickly. But there was no question about it doing well because it was Alan Moore. And then Sandman Overture, of course I was going to do well because it's Neil Gaiman, but in the process of working on it for myself, I'm like, oh my God, there's like huge gaps between issues. It took us 2 years to finish that thing, and But at the end of the day, when it's all done and it's on the shelf, no one remembers that.
Yeah, no one.
They're
No one at all.
like, so
There,
my best hope is that we're producing something that will be an evergreen book that people will want to revisit, and new people will discover it, and it won't matter how long it took to make when we were in the publication of individual chapters. So
I don't know if you're aware of this, but there was a bit of a debate around maybe 10, 15 years ago as to who was more valuable to the comics industry. Somebody who would produce an evergreen book, but couldn't really meet a monthly deadline. And usually the example that people would give would be somebody like you.
oh
Versus somebody who wasn't as good, but could produce something on a monthly schedule. And I'm not going to name the names of the people that they would give. But I think the argument was, yeah, you need a monthly cash flow for the industry, but really the evergreen books, they stay evergreen because they're really good.
right.
And they're going to stay, and it's going to bring in more cash flow
Right.
over time.
Right. Right. So yeah, thinking beyond the immediate now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I'm like, the European market has always done that, right? I don't know what it is for the manga market, but I imagine there's a similar thing going on with the manga market.
Well, those guys just don't get paid. So
but in terms of like the books being in print.
yeah.
But for me, I the fact that the American comics market was so not that for such a long time. So it's interesting that it still wrestles with that aspect. Because I feel like it should be more about making the work as good as it can be. But at least I can feel fortunate that things have moved into that direction enough to where it's okay if I don't seem to get a lot of people upset with me if I'm taking a long time. I even had someone write a letter to me and they're like, oh, I love this new book, and they ended it with like, don't rush it.
Don't rush it.
So yeah, so that's kind of nice to know that there's an audience there, particularly because I don't have a choice in the matter. It's not like it's either I work in comics in this way or I don't work in comics, because I can't do anything different than what I'm doing. So that's sort of like, that's always been kind of a tough thing for me going through my career. I always imagined myself being able to do a monthly comic and do these like a long run on Batman or something like that, whatever the heck it is, because doing monthly comics. But I very quickly found out I was not capable of doing a regular monthly comic without some sort of plan in place to have fill-in arcs by someone else or whatever. And that became apparent even as early as working on Chase. And so that was something I've wrestled with my whole career, and always kind of, I feel like it dogs me a little bit. And but there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, that's just who I am. Like, if I try to draw faster, it's going to look like shit. So
That's the way it goes, right? Because like you have all of these great artists, and I think it's lost to history how a lot of them really couldn't meet a monthly schedule. Like Art Adams.
Oh yeah.
Like Art Adams could never make a monthly schedule, and nobody remembers that now.
Right.
All they remember is how great Art Adams is.
Right. Exactly. But yeah, at the same time, you do have guys out there that are incredible that can meet that monthly schedule. I'm not sure how they're doing it. Either they're just have a certain innate talent that they don't struggle as much with the drawing side as I do, and so they're able to come to conclusions more quickly, or on the other side, which I hope is not the case, they're just killing themselves and working insane hours 7 days a week. And I do know there are some people in this industry that are doing that, and I worry for them a little bit, because I worry that how tough that must be for their lives in some ways, you know.
That's
And it's kind
supposedly
of
how.
makes me a little bit mad that that's sort of accepted as something that happens in our industry, and people, publishers kind of just like, well, that's what it takes to do the job. Never mind, is that the healthy thing to do the job? You know, so
Yeah. Anyway, back to Echolands. A fight breaks out between the pirates and Hope's group. Hope's group does not have a name, does it? Like they don't
no.
call themselves anything. They're not a gang or
No.
anything. And I find this quite sad, because in the very few pages that I had gotten to know Green Horizon 3018 Vermin Elimination Unit, I had gotten quite fond of him. The way that he introduced himself, and then, you know, he was like, oh, I gotta destroy you all. Wait, no, you all mean no harm. Can you help me get out of this thing? And
Yeah.
I thought he was kind of adorable.
Yeah.
And then you killed him.
Yeah. I wish we could have kept him around, but it would have been interesting to keep him around as part of the team.
It was sad. I don't think in like nearly 4 decades of reading comics, it takes a lot to kind of elicit an emotional reaction out of me now. But I'm like, oh, they killed the robot.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting because like he doesn't have any recognizable intelligent being features about him, but it's something about there, you can still prescribe a personality to him so quickly.
Is it the circle shape?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
because you are using you use a circle for him, and you're using triangles for Terra's Demand. So I'm wondering if there's something to those primal shapes. The whole thing ends with them at sea, and then a sea serpent comes out. I feel like this is maybe the third or fourth time I've seen you draw a sea crash. Do you just like the ocean?
Yes, very much. There, in a lot of my works, you'll even find little references to the ocean or to fish or some sort of aquatic life of some kind. Like, oh, it might be a little icon in the background on a building or something like that. Yeah.
Was the whole ship in Sandman Overture your idea? Did you ask
No,
Neil
that was
for
Neil
that?
actually.
Okay.
But it might have come from. It might come from like in my list of things I like or that I'm interested in. I might have mentioned the ocean to him or something involving the sea. So I made a list for him. He asked for a list of things that I would be interested in drawing, or he's like, it doesn't matter, whatever comes to your mind. And so I just made this list of things I like or things that came to my mind. And he found some way in some form to get every single one of them into the story. So amazing to do in only 6 issues.
You came up with Hope Red Hood many years ago. When you were working on Sandman Overture, was it weird working on a character named Hope?
Yeah, that was weird. Yeah, pretty funny.
Coincidental. Was that a complete coincidence?
Oh, complete. Yeah.
That's
awesome. At that point, I hadn't told Neil anything about the things I wanted to do with my own projects. We hadn't had those kinds of conversations. So, yeah, the first thing he knew about Echolands is when I may have said to him in passing, but he probably wouldn't even remember, because I can't even remember if I said anything to him that, I want to go do, create our own work. And even mentioned to him that we should create our own work together at some point. But I think the first he really knew anything of Echolands is when I asked if he would read the first 2 issues and if he liked it to give us a little bump. So,
and he did.
Yeah,
he did
graciously.
very well. That was one of the first promotional materials I saw in Echolands.
Yeah.
You're looking forward to his Netflix show?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Are you?
Yeah, looking very forward to it. Back to Echolands, the metaphysicist. I love the metaphysicist. I
Oh,
love it.
cool.
Because it gives us, it's such a clever way to give us a next issue solicit without giving us a next issue solicit.
Yeah.
A fight that is not black and white, a city that lives in shades of gray. I feel like that's definitely Horror Hill. Um, a man who nests upon gold in a room that reeks of wet dog and grave dirt. Very interesting stuff coming along. And we have part 2 of the Echo, the interview with Taros Demond. And what I love about this is that you're mentioning events that happened during his rise to power. So you're giving us bits and pieces of the history without spelling anything out, like the grain
Yeah.
rights, the season of smoke, the bridge, the tunnel wars.
Yeah. It's all stuff. Yeah. It's all important stuff. It's the sort of information that you can't, if we tried to put it into the body of the comic itself, the comic panels themselves, you're shoehorning that in. It just doesn't work. You know what I mean? So doing it here allows us to convey all that information that we have slowly to learn more about the world, because I mean, the amount of exposition it would take to go through all that stuff, you would need you need issue after issue after issue of just Taros Demond talking about this stuff, to get all that across. And so in this way, it allows us to pepper those things in very efficiently and give you a lot of context about the history of the world and who he is, what type of person he is.
And even if he's trying to hide the type of person he is during the interview. I
Yeah.
am most intrigued about the tunnel wars, considering that we spend a good amount of time in the tunnels in this comic. So I feel like there's a whole story there. Is there a possibility of spin-offs of Echolands going through all of these different, backstories and whatnot?
I don't know. I mean, we certainly could probably tell Echoland stories forever. I think the world is so vast, and the history is gonna, the things we're hinting at with the history are rich enough that you could tell all kinds of stories. We haven't really considered doing spin-offs until, I mean, it's always fun to think about those sorts of things, but pragmatically and realistically, it's not something to think about until, I mean, we got to have this thing be successful first before we can even consider that. But one of the things that we've, I don't know, as creative individuals, Haden and I are always thinking about, like when we come up with, say, the idea of the season of smoke as an example, it always sparks more ideas in our head, like, well, that's clearly a story that can be told. Will we ever get to tell that story? We don't know. And we've always thought about Echolands could easily be in more than one medium.
Yeah.
So very early on, we talked about it'd be interesting to do a novelization of Echolands. So, if that ever becomes a reality, possibly some of these tales could be done there. It could be a collection of short stories or whatever. And I think that's one of the things I like. I and Haden both love so much about the concept is how, because it's rich and diverse, but yet it can easily translate into any medium you want, really, because there's so many interesting things about it. It's not, is it designed to be a comic? Of course, but the way the story is structured and the world is constructed, that there's no reason it couldn't be another medium if we so chose. It would still work.
So how many more of these things do you need?
Of the chapters, the individual issues?
Yeah. Is it we still have a long way to go?
Oh yes.
I find it interesting. You say you could work on Echolands forever. Very
Mhm.
distinct from that is you didn't say you could work on Hope Red Hood forever.
Correct.
Okay, so if ever her story is done, you can just move on to another character,
Yeah,
most
if we
likely.
wanted to, for sure. And we could move anywhere in time. Like you said, we could go back and explore the past or tell another current day storyline. Uh, or whatever events that happen after this storyline. Presenting, as you can tell with this issue, we really kind of just in one more issue, we've opened up the doors further and expanded the possibilities just in this group of characters we've introduced, how indicating just how diverse this place can be. Um, Ultimately, Echolands is a concept, a world where you could tell any kind of story in any kind of genre you want to, um, which means it's endless possibility.
Very cool. And
Yeah,
you have here you again go through the soundtrack that you listen to while you're making this issue.
yeah,
And then you have a letters page because everybody who likes Echolands go email the Red Hood Club at gmail.com and mark it as okay to print when you send an email. My favorite one is the one asking is this email address real?
yeah. I thought that was pretty funny when I got that one. I'm like, huh, that's super appropriate.
And then all the rest of this I love. It looks to me like the the fans that you're getting as well, a lot of them are also aspiring artists, aspiring creatives.
Mm.
uh what what does it feel like to be such an inspiration to people in terms of their creativity?
Oh, geez, that's a heavy question. Uh,
I feel like I ask you a variation of this question every time.
I kind of feel like it's something I can't wrap my head around, being an inspiration for anybody. I'm just, for me, I'm just trying to do my thing. And it's like when, whenever somebody says that sort of thing to me, it's it's uh it's very humbling, but gratifying, but also kind of uh, not embarrassing, but sort of embarrassing to think about. I'm like, because I'm just trying to do my thing. I'm not, I guess it feels weird. That's the best way to say it. It feels weird.
That's a good weird.
Yeah.
uh, so thank you for Echolands #2. I can't wait for #3. uh to close this all off, I just wanted to kind of start something going on with each one of these, which is, can you tell us what you're liking right now from anywhere in all of media? Like just any one thing that you might
One of the
recommend
things,
to our viewers.
one of the things I'm looking forward to, I'm thinking about. Okay, well, one of the things that this is October, so Wendy and I, we love October for Halloween stuff. So this is our time where we just, if it's horror related, we'll watch it. Or if it's horror comics, so I pull out horror comics and I'll start reading horror comics. I have a few like Marvel omnibuses and stuff that are the old horror stuff. Uh, um, we watched Malignant this last weekend. I liked it. I thought it was pretty cool. I don't know what other people think of it, but there's some pretty inventive things in there that surprised me. If you get a chance to, I recommend watching it at least once. The other thing I'm considering starting to read, depends on how many comics I decide I want to read this month, but I'm thinking about starting Brahms' new novel, Slewfoot. I think it's called Slewfoot. Uh, yeah, his novels are fantastic. I don't know if you've had a chance to read any of them, but yeah, he's
Yeah,
yeah,
cool.
quite the author. Um, yeah, what sold me on him, I hadn't had a chance to read him before, but I loved his art, of course. But but I had always intended to pick up a couple of his books. But what got me to really dive into him is a friend of mine gave me, he knew I liked his art, and so he gave me his novel Krampus, because he knew that Wendy and I like, we like the idea of the Krampus because it's kind of horror related. And so he got me Brahms' novel of Krampus, and I read it, and it just blew me away. And so I went like, I gotta go get all of his other books. So, so his new one just came out. I'm super excited for that.
Very awesome. Thank you, J.H. Williams III. Again, for Echolands #2 is currently out at your local comic shop and also on Comixology. So go get it, people.
Thanks for having me.
As always, yeah.